The locks were open. Not broken. Not forced, not cut from their hasps with a chisel or shot through with a pistol at close range, the way a man in a hurry opens a lock when he doesn't care who knows he was there. They were open. The 4 iron padlocks that secured the freight wagon's strong box compartment were hanging from their hasps in the precise position of locks that had been opened with a key, turned fully, the shackle released and folded back, each one aligned with the same careful deliberateness, as if someone had taken a moment with each one to be certain the job was done cleanly. Holt Riker stood in the gray pre-dawn light of the relay station yard and looked at the 4 open locks and did not move for a long time. The silver was still there. He checked this before he checked anything else, lifted the heavy lid of the strong box compartment with both hands, the hinges moving silently on their grease, and looked at the 12 ingot crates still stacked in their careful arrangement, the straw packing undisturbed, the canvas strapping across the top still buckled at the tension he had set it to the previous evening. $100,000 of processed silver from the consolidated mine at Prescott, bound for the Federal Assay Office in Santa Fe, still exactly where it had been when he locked the wagon down at 9 o'clock the night before. He closed the lid. He looked at the 4 open locks. He was the only person who had a key. His name was Holt Riker, and he was 43 years old, and he had been working security contracts for the Consolidated Mining Company for 6 years, which was a respectable tenure in a profession where the turnover was driven by the particular combination of boredom and sudden violence that defined the work. He was not a famous man and had no desire to be. He was a man with a documented record of completed contracts and a reputation in the specific community of mine security and freight protection that he had built with the same method he applied to everything: showing up, paying attention, and not doing anything foolish when the pressure came.
The contract for the silver shipment had come through the company's regional office in Prescott 3 weeks ago, a formal written agreement, witnessed and sealed, for the overnight security of a freight wagon carrying 12 crates of processed silver ingots from the Consolidated Smelter to the Santa Fe Road, where a federal escort would take custody at the relay station at Cienega Wells. The relay station was a day's ride south of Prescott on the old stage road, a modest operation with a main house, a stable, 2 outbuildings, and a yard enclosed on 3 sides by a low adobe wall. It was operated by a man named Caswell and his daughter, who was 17 and whose name was Petra. Holt had arrived at Cienega Wells the previous afternoon with the wagon and a teamster named Grady who drove for the company and who had gone to sleep in the stable loft at sundown without being asked. The federal escort was due at dawn, 4 marshals out of Albuquerque who had been contracted to take the shipment the rest of the way to Santa Fe. The federal escort had not yet arrived. Holt stood in the yarn with the 4 open locks and looked at the position of the sky and estimated the time at approximately 30 minutes before full sunrise, and thought about what the 4 open locks meant and what they did not mean, and what the interval between now and the arrival of the federal marshals required of him. He had locked the wagon at 9 o'clock the previous evening, after Caswell had brought supper to the yard, and Petra had helped carry the plates, and Grady had eaten quickly and gone to the stable. He had locked each of the 4 padlocks himself, checked each one twice, and distributed the 4 keys in the manner he always distributed keys on overnight contracts: 1 on his person, 1 in a sealed envelope in the relay station's strongbox, 1 in a second sealed envelope that traveled with the teamster, and 1, the 4th, that he kept in the left boot, which was the backup position he had used for 11 years and which had never failed him. He sat on the yard wall after supper and watched the stars and listened to the relay station settle into its night sounds. The old stage road ran south through open grassland and then into the pine country that came down from the mountains to the east, and at 9 o'clock the road was empty in both directions as far as the eye could follow it in the dark. The stable was quiet. The main house was dark. Caswell had gone in at 8, Petra at 8:30. At some point he had slept. He did not know when. He had not intended to sleep, had been sitting with his back against the wheel of the freight wagon and his rifle across his knees, And at some point, the rifle was still across his knees and the sky was beginning to show gray at the east, and the 4 locks were open. He checked his person for the key. It was in the inner pocket of his coat where he had put it the previous evening. He checked the sealed envelope in the relay station's strongbox, Caswell's box, inside the main house, to which Caswell had given him access. The envelope was still sealed. He went to the stable and found Grady still asleep in the loft, and shook him awake and watched him produce the 3rd envelope from his coat, also sealed. He took off his left boot and found the 4th key still in it. 4 keys, all 4 accounted for, all 4 apparently in the positions he had placed them. 4 open locks. He sat on the wheel hub of the freight wagon and looked at the gray sky and thought about this for a long time. Caswell came out of the main house at first light. He was a lean man in his 60s, deliberate in his movements, with the careful economy of someone who has operated a relay station alone for many years and has learned to do everything at the correct pace because there is no one else to compensate for errors. He looked at the wagon and then at Holt, and then at the 4 open locks on the strongbox compartment. "Silver's still there," Holt said before Caswell could ask. Caswell looked at the locks for a long moment. "How?" "I don't know," Holt said. "Your keys? All 4 accounted for, all where I put them." Caswell was quiet for a moment. He looked at the relay station yard, the adobe wall, the gate, the stable. Then he looked at the main house. "Petra," Holt said. "She was asleep," Caswell said immediately. "I'm not suggesting she did anything," Holt said carefully. "I'm asking whether she was in the yard at any point in the night." Caswell looked at him. "I'll go ask her." Holt waited in the yard. The sky was fully light now, the sun not yet above the eastern mountains, but the light even and gray gold across the grassland. The road south was still empty. The federal marshals were not late yet, not by his estimate, but they would arrive in the next hour, and he needed to have something to tell them that made sense. He walked the perimeter of the yard a second time, looking at the adobe wall and the gate and the ground inside the wall. The ground was dry and hard. It hadn't rained in 2 weeks, and the surface showed nothing useful. At the north section of the wall, near the gatepost, he found what he had been looking for and had not expected to find: a boot print pressed into the narrow strip of softer soil at the wall's base, where water from the stable roof occasionally drained and kept the ground slightly yielding. A single boot print, facing toward the gate, the toe impression pointing outward. Whoever had made it had been standing at the gate facing out, looking toward the road. The print was small, child-sized almost, or a woman's boot. Caswell came back from the main house with Petra behind him. She was 17, dark-haired, composed in the way of people who have grown up in isolated circumstances and have developed an interior life of some substance to compensate. She looked at Holt with dark eyes that were not afraid. "She says she was in the yard," Caswell said. His voice was controlled. "Around midnight. She couldn't sleep." Holt looked at Petra. "Did you see anyone at the wagon?" "No, I didn't go near the wagon. I went to the gate and looked at the road for a while and went back inside." "Why the gate?" She looked at her father, then back at Holt. "I heard something on the road. Not someone approaching, the other direction, going south." Holt was still. "Moving fast or slow?" "Slow," she said, "like someone trying not to be heard." He thought about this while he waited for the federal marshals. Someone had moved south on the road at midnight, slowly, trying not to be heard. The 4 locks on the wagon had been opened, with a key or keys that had not been removed from their positions, and the silver had not been taken. The boot print at the gate was Petra's, from her midnight vigil at the gate. He went back to the strongbox compartment and looked at the 4 locks more carefully than he had looked at them in the first shock of discovery. He examined the hasps, the shackles, the keyholes. Then he found it, on the 3rd lock, barely visible in the morning light,
A very faint scratch mark on the interior of the keyhole, the kind of mark made by a pick moving inside the mechanism in the hands of someone who was good at this but not perfect. The scratch was fresh, the metal bright at the mark, not yet oxidized. Not a key, a pick. Someone had picked all 4 locks in the night, opened the strongbox, looked at the silver, and left without taking anything. Then they had moved south on the road at a pace designed to be silent. He sat with this new shape of the problem. Picking 4 locks on a freight wagon required skill and time. Doing it without waking the man sitting against the wagon wheel required either exceptional patience or the assistance of something that ensured the man would not wake easily. He thought about the coffee Caswell had brought out with the supper, the particular heaviness of his sleep, the kind of heavy, sudden sleep that did not feel like normal tiredness. He had been drugged. The coffee, not enough to incapacitate him, enough to ensure he slept through what needed to happen while he slept. He looked at the main house. Caswell, or Petra. He sat with this for a long time. He did not want it to be either of them, but the coffee had come from the main house, and there were only 2 people in the main house, and the boot print at the gate was small, and Petra had been awake at midnight and heard something moving south. Or had she? Or had she been the something moving south, returning from wherever she had gone, and the story of hearing it was the cover for having been it? He was still sitting with this when Grady came out of the stable with sleep still in his face and a cup of water in his hand, and stopped when he saw the expression on Holt's face. "What happened?" Grady said. Holt told him. Grady listened without interrupting, which was a quality Holt appreciated about him. When Holt finished, Grady looked at the 4 open locks and then at Holt and said, "So someone picked the locks, looked at the silver, didn't take it, and rode south."
"That's what I have," Holt said. "Why look if you're not going to take?" "To confirm it's there," Holt said. Grady thought about this. So someone needed to know whether the silver was on this wagon before they did something else? That's one way to read it. What's the other way? That someone who was going to take it changed their mind. What would change their mind? Holt looked at the road south, finding out something they didn't know when they came in. Like what? Like how much silver there actually is, Holt said slowly, or who else is coming for it. He thought about this. 12 crates, each crate approximately 40 pounds of processed silver, 480 pounds of silver, requiring horses and a wagon to move, not something one person takes on impulse in the middle of the night. Whatever the plan had been, it required more than one person and more preparation than a single night allowed. The picking of the locks was reconnaissance, not execution. Someone needed to verify the shipment before the actual operation could proceed. And when they verified it, they left, which meant the actual operation was still coming. He looked at the sky. The sun was up now, the road south still empty. The federal marshals were not late yet, but they would be here within the hour, and if the plan to take the silver had been postponed rather than abandoned, if the reconnaissance of the previous night was the first step of something that was still in motion, then the hour before the marshals arrived was the most dangerous hour of the entire contract. He went to the stable and got Grady moving.
He did not tell Caswell what he suspected. He told Caswell that he had found evidence of a lock-picking attempt and that he was going to move the wagon inside the stable until the federal marshals arrived. This was true in every particular and contained nothing that required him to accuse a man whose innocence or guilt he had not yet determined. Caswell helped him move the wagon. The stable was solid adobe and timber, with heavy doors that could be barred from the inside. They moved the wagon in, Grady taking the team, Holt watching the road. When the wagon was inside and the doors barred, the 3 of them, Holt, Grady, Caswell, stood in the stable with the freight wagon and the silver and the 4 open locks and the sound of the horses in their stalls and the light coming through the gaps in the stable wall in thin, pale blades. "Someone's coming back," Caswell said. It was not a question. "I think so," Holt said. Caswell looked at the stable doors. "The girl," he said quietly. "I haven't decided what I think about that," Holt said. "I have," Caswell said. His voice was flat and entirely without defensiveness, the voice of a man who has looked at the facts and arrived at a conclusion he does not want but will not deny. "She's been talking to a man who works the road south of here, passes through every 2 weeks or so with a mule and some goods, claims to be a trader. I never trusted him. He's been talking to her for 3 months." He looked at his hands. "I should have stopped it sooner." "Where is she now?" Holt said. "Main house," Caswell said. "I told her to stay inside." Holt thought about the small boot print at the gate, about the story of hearing something on the road, about a 17-year-old girl and a trader who passed through every 2 weeks and had been talking to her for 3 months, about what a man with a plan to take $100,000 of silver might offer a girl in an isolated relay station to get the information he needed, the schedule, the security arrangements, the number of guards, the position of the keys.
She had not been moving south on the road at midnight. She had been at the gate, as she said, listening to the sound of the man she had trusted going away with what he had come for. Not the silver, not yet, but the knowledge of it, the confirmation. She had stood at the gate and listened to him go, and understood, perhaps for the first time in full, what she had helped arrange. He looked at Caswell. "She didn't open the locks," he said. "She gave someone the information that made opening them possible. That's a different thing." Caswell looked at him. "Is it?" "Yes," Holt said, "it is, and it matters, because she's the one who can tell us what's coming next." Petra told them. She sat in the main house kitchen with her father beside her and Holt across the table, and she told them with the particular flat honesty of someone who has already done the most difficult part of an accounting, the part where they admit to themselves what they did, and is now simply delivering the record of it. The man's name was Aldrich. He had been passing through Cienega Wells for 3 months, always with the same story, a trader working the road between Prescott and the southern settlements, carrying small goods, nothing that required inspection. He had talked to her, she said. He had asked questions that seemed ordinary until they didn't, about the relay station, about what came through, about the schedules and the guards and the arrangements for large shipments. She had answered because the questions seemed ordinary and because he was the first person who had talked to her in months as if she were a person worth talking to, rather than a relay station operator's daughter. 3 weeks ago, he had told her about the silver shipment. He had known about it before she did, which told Holt that Aldrich had sources inside the consolidated operation, which was a problem that extended beyond this contract. He had told her what he needed and what her part in it was. Nothing violent, he said, nothing that would cost anyone anything, just the schedule confirmation, the number of guards, and one other thing that she named with a steadiness that cost her more than it appeared to. "The key positions," Holt said quietly before she could say it. She looked at him. Yes. He had told her the schedule for the silver shipment. She had confirmed it. She had told him how many guards, 1, which was Holt, and she had told him where the keys were kept. Not the keys themselves, she hadn't touched the keys, but their positions. Inner coat pocket, sealed envelope in the strongbox, sealed envelope with the teamster, left boot.
Aldrich had come to Cienega Wells in the night with that information, and had drugged the coffee, and had picked the locks, and had looked at the silver, and had left, and was coming back. "When?" Holt said. "He said he would need 2 days after the confirmation to bring the men," Petra said. "He did the confirmation last night." "So today," Holt said, "or tonight." "Today," she said, "before the escort arrives. He knows about the escort." Holt looked at Caswell. Caswell looked at his daughter with an expression that was not anger, not yet, or perhaps not ever, which was a testament to the man. It was the expression of someone absorbing a fact that changes the shape of everything they thought they knew, and doing so without collapsing. "How many men?" Holt said. "He didn't say, but he talked about a wagon, a second wagon, to transfer the crates."
A second wagon for 480 pounds of silver, multiple men, a planned approach on a known schedule with full knowledge of the security arrangements. Holt looked at Grady. Grady looked back at him with the expression of a man who drives freight wagons and did not sign up for anything beyond that and was not going to pretend otherwise. "I'm not a gun hand, I'll tell you that straight." "I know it. I'm not asking you to be." "What are you asking?" "I'm asking whether you can drive a wagon hard south on that road and not stop for anything." Grady looked at the stable doors. "In the next hour?" "Yes." "Where am I driving to?" "To the federal marshals. They're coming north. You go south and meet them and bring them back." "And while I'm doing that?" Holt looked at the stable, at the freight wagon with its 4 open locks and its $100,000 of silver still inside, at Caswell and Petra in the main house, at the road south, still empty, for now. "I'm gonna be here," he said.
The moral weight of the next hour settled on him while Grady harnessed the relay station's spare horse to the light buckboard and prepared to ride south. The freight wagon stayed. The silver stayed. Holt stayed. He had the option of sending the freight wagon with Grady, loading both wagons and driving south together toward the incoming marshals, abandoning the relay station in the Caswells. This was the safer option for the silver. The marshals were coming north. 2 wagons moving south toward them reduced the time the silver spent in unsecured territory. But Aldrich and his men were coming with a wagon, which meant they were coming to Cienega Wells specifically, because that was where Petra's information had placed the silver. And if Holt moved the silver and the relay station was empty, Aldrich would find an empty station and either pursue south toward Grady or, worse, understand that the operation had been compromised and disappear into the pine country to the east, where he would remain a problem for future shipments on this road. Holt wanted Aldrich to arrive. He wanted him to arrive and find what he expected to find, a relay station with a freight wagon in the stable and a single guard, and he wanted to hold that situation until Grady returned with the marshals. The problem with this plan was that it required him to hold a relay station with a family in it against an unknown number of armed men for an unknown period of time. He talked to Caswell about it plainly, without softening it. Caswell listened and then said, "You could put us in the root cellar." "I could," Holt said. "And you'd be alone." "Yes." Caswell looked at his daughter. Petra was looking at Holt with the expression of someone who understands that what is about to happen is partly her responsibility and is not going to look away from that. "I want to help," she said. "You have helped," Holt said. "You told me what I needed to know. That was the help." "It doesn't feel like enough." "It never does," he said. "It still is." He put Caswell and Petra in the root cellar beneath the main house. Not locked, he was careful about that, leaving the interior mechanism so they could open it from inside if necessary, and he went back to the stable and barred the doors and sat with the freight wagon in the silver and the 4 open locks and waited. They came at mid-morning, not at dawn as he had calculated. 3 men on horseback and a 4th driving a flatbed wagon, exactly the configuration for transferring 12 crates of silver ingots. They came from the south, not the north, which told him Aldrich had been camped south of Cienega Wells and had watched Grady's departure on the buckboard and had decided the departure of the second man made his window available. This was a complication. If Aldrich had watched Grady leave south, he knew the timing. He knew Grady was going for the marshals, knew approximately how long it would take, knew the window he had to work in. He was not moving carelessly. He had made a calculated adjustment. Holt heard them come into the yard. He heard the horses and the wagon and the sound of men's voices speaking low. He heard the main house door tried and found barred. He heard one of the men move to the stable door and try it and find it barred. Then Aldrich's voice at the stable door, clear and unhurried. "Riker," he said, "I know you're in there. I know you're alone. I know you sent the teamster for the marshals, which means I have approximately 3 hours before they arrive. I don't want to damage the station. I don't want anyone hurt. I want the silver, and I'm going to have it.
and the question is whether we arrive at that conclusion with the least possible cost to everyone involved. Holt sat against the freight wagon wheel and said nothing. "You're one man," Aldrich said. "I have 3. The doors are timber, and they will come down. I would rather they didn't, but they will if I need them to." Holt thought about the Caswells and the root cellar, about Grady on the road south, about the 3 hours that Aldrich had estimated, which was a reasonable estimate. He thought about $100,000 of silver and the contract he had signed, and the 6 years of completed contracts that constituted his professional reputation and the specific community in which that reputation operated. He thought about what it would mean to open the stable doors and what it would mean not to. "Aldrich," he said. His voice carried through the timber door easily. "Yes," Aldrich said. "How long have you been planning this?" A pause. 6 months, Aldrich said, since the Consolidated announced the Santa Fe shipment. "You have a man inside the company." "I had," Aldrich said, past tense. "And Petra," Holt said. Another pause. "The girl didn't understand what she was doing. I want you to know I told her nothing that could be used against her in a proceeding." "That was careful of you," Holt said. "I'm a careful man." "Not careful enough," Holt said. "You left a pick scratch on the 3rd lock." Silence. "Open the doors, Riker," Aldrich said. "Walk away. The silver gets to Santa Fe eventually. The company reinsures. The loss is documented. Life continues. No one gets hurt this morning." Holt sat with the freight wagon and the silver and the 4 open locks and the Caswells in the root cellar and the road north that Grady was riding south on right now and would be riding back on within the hour if the marshals were where they were supposed to be. An hour. Aldrich had said 3 hours. He was wrong by 2. "I'll open the doors," Holt said, "when the marshals get here."
They did not come down immediately. Aldrich was a careful man, and careful men do not immediately commit to actions that cannot be undone. They spent 40 minutes in the yard. Holt could hear their movements, the occasional low conversation, the sound of the horses, and in those 40 minutes, Holt did 3 things. He moved the 12 crates from the strongbox compartment of the freight wagon into the hay at the back of the stable, covering them carefully, replacing them in the compartment with the saddle weights from the stable wall, heavy iron, approximately the right weight, not silver, but close enough to buy time. He relocked 3 of the 4 padlocks on the strongbox compartment with his key. He left the 4th lock open, the way Aldrich had left them. When the stable doors finally came down, Aldrich's men with a timber ram, 3 strikes, the bar giving on the 3rd, Holt was against the wall in the shadow of the hay, not at the wagon. The 4 men came in with their weapons and went to the freight wagon and opened the strongbox compartment and found the saddle weights under the canvas strapping, and approximately 4 seconds of confusion before Holt said from the shadow of the hay, "The marshals are in the yard." They were. Grady had found them 11 miles south, moving at a good pace, and they had ridden hard and arrived in the yard while Aldrich's men were working on the stable door, which was a timeline that depended on Aldrich having underestimated the federal escort's pace by approximately 2 hours. It was over quickly after that, in the way that things are over quickly when 4 armed federal marshals are in a yard, and the men they're looking for are in a stable with no exit. The accounting took most of the day. The marshals processed the scene, took statements, identified the inside man at the Consolidated, a clerk in the shipping office who had been providing schedules and security arrangements for a share of the planned proceeds. Aldrich and his 3 men were taken into custody. The silver was loaded back into the freight wagon in its proper compartment, and the 4 locks replaced with locks from the marshal's own supply, which was an irony Holt noted without commenting on. Caswell came out of the root cellar when Holt called down to him. Petra came out behind her father and stood in the yard and looked at the federal marshals and at Aldrich being held at the yard wall and at Holt. "I'll need to give a statement," she said. "Yes," Holt said. "About what I told him?" "Yes." She looked at Aldrich. Aldrich did not look back at her. He was looking at the ground, the particular posture of a careful man who has run out of careful options. She looked at him for a long time. "He was very convincing," she said. "They usually are," Holt said. "Does that matter in the statement?" "It matters for understanding what happened," Holt said. "I don't know that it changes what happened." She nodded slowly. "No," she said. "I suppose it doesn't." She gave her statement to the federal marshals with the same flat honesty she had used at the kitchen table that morning, and when it was done, she went back into the main house, and Caswell went with her, and Holt sat on the yard wall and watched the marshals finish their work and thought about the night he had just come through. The Silver left Cienega Wells that afternoon with the federal escort and arrived in Santa Fe 4 days later without further incident. The Consolidated Mining Company received a complete report of the security breach, the inside source, and the events at the relay station, along with a recommendation from Holt that the key distribution system for high-value shipments be redesigned. They implemented the recommendation. Holt received his contract payment and a written commendation from the company's security director, which he folded and put in the same drawer where he kept the other commendations from 6 years of completed contracts. He thought about Petra for some time after, about what it had cost her to tell him the truth that morning, and about what it would cost her going forward. She was 17, and she had trusted the wrong person, and she had told the truth when it mattered, and she would carry both of those things for a long time in the specific way that young people carry things, which is very close to the surface until they learn to carry them deeper. He wrote a letter to the federal marshal's office recommending that her cooperation be noted formally in the disposition of the case against Aldrich. He did not know whether this would make a material difference, and he sent the letter anyway. What remained, when everything else had been accounted for, was the question of the 4 open locks and what they had meant in the dark of early morning when he stood alone in the relay station yard and understood that something had happened in the night that he had not prevented. In 6 years of security contracts, he had not lost a shipment. He had not lost this one. But the 4 open locks remained in his memory as the image of a near thing, of how close the gap between a completed contract and a failed one could be, and of what lived in that gap. A girl at a gate listening to a man she had trusted riding away in the dark, and the scratch of a pick on the 3rd lock and 4 keys all exactly where he had put them. The gap between the completed and the failed was not, in the end, the Silver or the locks or the marshals arriving in time. It was the girl telling him the truth at the kitchen table. Without that, the saddle weights and the strongbox would not have been there, and Aldrich would not have had his 4 seconds of confusion, and Holt would not have had the moment he needed. The girl who had helped Aldrich had also, in the final accounting, been the reason Aldrich failed. He thought about this on the road back to Prescott, riding alone in the autumn afternoon with the mountains to the east and the pine country on both sides of the road, and the particular quality of light that comes in October at this elevation, warm and long, and already carrying in it the foreknowledge of winter. A person can do the thing that makes the harm possible and then do the thing that prevents it. Both of those are true simultaneously. The accounting does not cancel. The harm that was enabled and the harm that was prevented sit beside each other in the record, and neither erases the other. But a person who sees clearly what they have done and tells the truth about it when it matters has done something real. It does not undo what came before. It is still something real.